Hey everyone, my name's Ansh, and this is my screen recording for my extended essay cafe presentation. So, this is my presentation for my extended essay cafe on the relationship between India and the US. So, for my extended essay, I've chosen to write about history. More specifically, I want to analyze the relationship between India and the US and assess how terrorism, international affairs, and advancements in technology between 1971 and 2008 impacted their relationship. Therefore, my research question is, between 1971 and 2008, how did terrorism, global affairs, and technological advancements impact the relationship between US and India? Both of these countries are pretty close to my heart, as I've lived in the United States most of my life and was born in India, and most of my family lives there. Therefore, I want to analyze the relationship between the two countries and what impacted it and caused it to change. Before we start, let me give you some background information. India was liberated from Britain in 1947, making it a fairly new country. From the start, India and the US have had a rocky relationship. From being on opposite sides of the Cold War to being close allies in the fight of terrorism, India and the US have had major events that shifted their stance towards each other. So my extended essay will encompass an introduction, 3 chapters, and a conclusion. In the introduction, I will give background information, some overview, and some context about what I'm writing and why I'm writing it. In chapter 1, I will analyze the impact that terrorism has had on their relationship by focusing on 3 major events: Rajiv Gandhi's assassination, 9/11 attacks in the US, and 26/11 attacks in Mumbai. Moving on, in chapter 2, I will talk about global affairs, including the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, the Bhopal gas leak of 1984, and the Kargil conflict of 1999. All 3 of these events created some shift in the dynamic between the United States and India, making them worthy of talking about. For chapter 3, advancements in technology, I'm not too sure what to write about aside from the development of India's nuclear arsenal and maybe some space missions. I will end by concluding the entire essay by giving a summary of what I said and talking about its modern day implications. So let's focus on terrorism, specifically the 9/11 attacks on the US. So this was an attack carried out by Al Qaeda where they hijacked 2 airplanes and crashed it into the Pentagon and the Twin Towers. Ever since this attack, the United States and India have joined their militaries in a way that they're fighting the war on terror in the Middle East, and they have become strategic allies for protecting each other and ensuring global peace. Before the event, India and the US weren't on the greatest of terms, as they were not very friendly and have been in indirect confrontation with each other. So next, in global affairs, I want to talk about the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. On December 3rd, Pakistan bombed 11 Indian air bases, causing Prime Minister Indira Gandhi to declare war and retaliate. Nations including the US, Britain, and China rushed to Pakistan's aid, causing India to be isolated from the rest of the world. But the Soviet Union came to India's defense and threatened war against the rest of the nations. The USSR sent nuclear subs to stop Britain in the Bay of Bengal, and that was a key event because Britain and the US were terrified of starting a nuclear conflict that could lead to mutually assured destruction. After the conflict, India deviated from its position of neutrality in the Cold War and signed a 20-year friendship treaty with the Soviet Union, which was a big shift in stance and made the United States very uneasy. Moving forward, advancements in technology, I want to talk about India's nuclear arsenal. In 1974, India was completed its first nuclear test, making it the first nation outside of the 5 UN Security Council members to have nuclear capabilities. Then in 1978, the US enacted the Non-Proliferation Act, which would allow their agencies to inspect Indian nuclear facilities. But India refused to sign it, and the US cut off all their aid. Moving forward in time, in 1999, India had another successful nuclear test about 150 kilometers from the Pakistani border in a place called Pokhran. This was very, very frightening as there were tensions escalating between India and the US, and that could lead to massive global nuclear conflict that could lead to the end of humanity. Therefore, they were condemned internationally. In 2005, India and the US started making their nuclear ties. Instead of separating their nuclear ties, they became closer. India signed it and ensured that they would separate their civil and militaristic nuclear endeavors and will place the nuclear power under international supervision, specifically the International Atomic Agency. In return, the US assured to help India with its civil nuclear program to help provide energy and power to the entire nation. This is my bibliography for the sources that I gather the information from for this presentation. So this is where I'm at a dilemma. Well, not really a dilemma, but my thought process has kind of shifted. After doing research and creating this presentation, I realized what I want to talk about and the sheer amount of information that I want to cover is too much to be conveyed in a 4,000 word essay. So after talking to my extended essay supervisor, the extended essay coordinator, and a couple of other teachers at my school, I've decided that I will revise my extended essay question and revise my table of contents so that it will provide a more powerful understanding of what I want to talk about and a better paper and make it even stronger than it will be. So my revised research question is, to what extent were global affairs in the late 20th century and terrorism in the early 21st century major turning points in the relationship between the United States and India? This research question is more aligned with the History IA, in the sense that I will be able to argue for a point and convey what I think based on data and information that I gather from these various events. I feel this makes the paper stronger because, like I said, I'd be able to argue a point, and I wouldn't just be listing information and explaining changes. I'd be able to say, like, this event was super impactful and was a major turning point versus this event wasn't as big of a turning point. So my new proposed table of contents would be an introduction, just 2 chapters, and a conclusion. My introduction and conclusion will be the same as before, but my chapters will be different. In Chapter 1, I will analyze global affairs in the late 20th century, including the Indochina War of 1962, the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971, and the collapse of the Soviet Union. These 3 events were major events and helped shift the relationship between the United States and India. In the second chapter, I will talk about slightly more modern events and analyze the impact that terrorism has had, specifically the 9/11 attack in the US and the 26/11 attack in Mumbai, and their impact on the relationship between the United States and India and how that shifted. So my plans going forward is to research more information for each chapter and subsection within the chapter. This will allow me to be able to coherently form paragraphs and argue my points. And then I want to write a more detailed outline because what I have right now for my table of contents is very vague. With a detailed outline, I'll be able to understand what I'm trying to write and gain a better picture of what my essay is going to be all about. From that detailed outline, I can move on to step 3, which would be to start writing the different chapters and subsections in a form of mini essays or mini paragraphs, in which each subsection would be built off of the outline that I created, and the detailed outline would make it very easy to create those. Finally, I'll compile all of them together and format it in a way that makes it flow nicely to make it seem like one coherent paper. Currently, I am struggling to utilize my time effectively as I'm on lockdown right now. Therefore, I'm at home for a long time, and I get distracted very easily as my parents come into my room and start talking to me, or I'm watching a video on YouTube and fall into their rabbit hole. So I need to be able to focus and set aside time to write my extended essay. Additionally, I need to organize my paper in a way that makes sense and format the information correctly so that my argument is conveyed in the best way possible. Finally, I need to find primary sources and balance it with my secondary sources, because in my bibliography, most of the sources that I used to make this presentation were secondary sources. Everyone, thank you for watching, and please leave me some feedback on how I can improve and make my extended essay even better. Thank you.